Hi, my name is Karan and I welcome you to the ACLR8 Founder Academy podcast. I've been a founder for almost 12 years. My first venture was a social network for real estate agents, and I was lucky enough to sell this company to Quicker back in 2015. My second venture was a D2C health and wellness brand where I did over 50 crores in bootstrapped revenue in 5 years. Over my journey of building these two companies, I realized that I was able to go to 0 to 100 crores twice, but was never able to build something very, very large. And that's when the genesis of ACLR8 happened. At ACLR8, we're trying to build the Y Combinator of consumer brands and consumer enablers in India. We believe that if we can offer early stage founders a little bit of capital and then support them with community, mentorship, GTM, and partnerships, we can help them build large brands. We've been joined in this endeavor by 60 plus unicorn founders who mentor and support our portfolio companies. We also run this podcast where we feature the stories of some of India's best founders and investors and learn from them on how did they go about building their businesses. So I hope that you enjoy the podcast today. And if you're an early stage founder who's looking for something like ACLR8 and you're looking to partner with someone who can help you scale, then please feel free to reach out.
My grandfather cycle पे वेस्ट बेचते थे गंजीज and people used to call him Ganjiwala. In 1983, he incorporated a private limited company called Ganjiwala Private Limited. Before we got colonized, India used to make more than 30% of the world's garments. They are nowhere in the fashion, global fashion.
Contract manufacturers हैं.
Yeah. आज हम सिर्फ contract manufacturer बन के रह गए हैं.
One quote from your website: Are we sacrificing too much for so little? Right, for a piece of clothing.
See, I believe a fashion business can be scalable without being fast.
65% of the world's child labor, right, is actually employed in the fashion industry.
Yeah. So fashion is the second most polluting industry in the world. We started Dressfolk with the idea of modernizing India's traditional handlooms and crafts and bringing them in an avatar that would appeal to today's consumers. Recently, we saw Janhvi Kapoor in a movie Ulaj wearing Dressfolk. अगर Dressfolk पे किसी भी customer ने कुछ भी खरीदा है, there's a 100% refund policy.
Are there any differences between how men shop and women shop? How did you get some of India's best D2C founders to invest in Dressfolk? What's the future of Indian craft industry now, like according to you? Super great, Nitin. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for your time. We've been chatting for many days, and thank you finally, coming here on a weekend and giving us your time. So, very inspired by your journey of building Dressfolk over the last few years. You guys obviously are a mission-led brand, empowering local artisans and modernizing the great Indian sari, right? So obviously we'll talk about the mission behind the brand. We'll also talk about how has been your journey in terms of fundraising, in terms of building the brand. And essentially आज का जो podcast है उसका जो idea है, right, like जो people who consume the podcast are actually young founders, right? Like maybe they might not be from a Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, right? They might be from a Kanpur where you are, right? So people are very excited to kind of learn more about different businesses. कैसे आपने gap ढूंढा, कैसे आपने branding करी, आप मेटा एड्स कैसे चलाते हो, आप मेट्रिक्स कौन से मेजर करते हो, हाउ टू बिल्ड प्रॉफिटेबली, चैलेंजेस क्या होते हैं, राइट? सो वील ट्राई टू काइंड ऑफ गो डीपर इनटू दैट एज पार्ट ऑफ द पॉडकास्ट एज वेल. But yeah, I think I would love to begin by a quick intro from you, like what are you guys building at Dressfolk, and maybe you can also share what inspired you to start Dressfolk.
Thank you for having me, Karan. It's absolutely wonderful to be sharing our journey and more so India's handloom and craft journey on the platform.
Yeah.
The idea with Dressfolk actually came from a trip to Rajasthan a few years back.
Interesting.
And before that, a quick background about me. I was born and raised in Kanpur, did my schooling from there, was raised in a joint family, business family. So business is something that I've heard during dinner table conversations. So that was always inculcated with me. But interestingly, मेरे को life में एक चीज़ नहीं करनी थी. That was fashion and textiles.
Interesting. वो तुम वही कर रहे हो अभी.
And I think how you're laughing, God is also laughing somewhere today.
Yeah.
So a quick background story why मेरे को नहीं करना था.
Yeah.
So as I told you, my family was into business. That business was manufacturing textiles and apparel for defense forces.
Oh, interesting. So like B2B supply.
Yes, everything was actually defense. So defense forces were our only customers. All defense forces, all defense forces and paramilitary forces. And my grandfather, he started very early in life, working very early in life at the age of 7.
Wow.
So he had lost his father, so he had to start working. And then वो cycle पे vest बेचते थे गंजीज, and people used to call him गंजी वाला.
Wow.
From there,
आई थिंक हम लोगों के लिए entrepreneurship फैशनेबल होती है, बट आई थिंक हमारे पेरेंट्स और उनके पेरेंट्स की जनरेशन के लिए इट वाज अ नेसेसिटी, राइट? लाइक स्टार्टिंग अप एट 7 एंड गोइंग थ्रू ऑल ऑफ दैट.
yeah, because for us also we are privileged that we had good education. As you mentioned, this was a choice for us.
Yeah.
But for our parents and grandparents generation,
Yeah.
people who could not find the jobs
Yeah.
used to get into entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
So think like as a country we've come far from where we were just a few decades back.
Yeah, for sure. Amazing. Starting up at 7.
Yeah. So again he had to. तो उन्होंने गंजीज बेचना चालू किया. तो साइकिल पे जब वो जाते थे, people used to call him गंजी वाला. He was recognized by that name. And then few years down the line he set up a few machines in a room. And in 1983 he incorporated a private limited company called Ganjiwala Private Limited.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah. And वहाँ से there was no looking back. The business really grew. So we had an acre big factory where everything was in-house, all the processes, like huge chimneys, everything was in-house. And it was a family business where my father, my uncles, everyone
Everybody got involved.
Yes.
You would have seen it closely as well.
Yes, during my early years, because I used to spend a lot of time with my granddad also. So used to get to learn a lot since early ages. तो वो बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग था. But as you know, things were going great. Towards late 90s, a couple of policies changed.
Okay.
Government policies changed. And basically जो हमारी procurement होती थी for the product which had maximum exposure,
like which was a vest and all.
yes, वो the policy changed and उसका procurement बंद हो गया था.
अच्छा, so basically the policy of the defense department and the army kind of changed ki they would not buy from you.
From the manufacturers.
Okay.
The new policy which came into place was to give money to the soldiers to buy from the open market.
Oh, interesting.
So the whole business changed
My God, and it would have collapsed.
in few years. So usually क्या होता है, like whenever ट्रेन में ब्रेक लगता है तो इमीडिएटली तो रुकती नहीं है. एंड यूजुअली बिजनेस फैमिलीज में क्या होता है, कॉन्वर्जेशंस एट वर्क डू नॉट कम इनटू होम easily. So it took us a few years before we even got to know
the shock,
कि कुछ हुआ है. But then things started going very bad. So I remember in 4th and 5th standard, I was probably the fanciest kid in the class, using the best of notebooks, best of stationery. And from there, in just a couple of years' time, moved on to getting second-hand books.
My God.
Yeah. So then things really changed. And from there I remember it just spiraled down. So
क्योंकि आप लोगों का like पूरा investment and all would have also gone in the capex and in all the material and everything, and then suddenly not having that supply or not having those orders.
So एक तो capex था, and secondly हमारा एक बहुत बड़ा order था उस time पे which got stuck.
अच्छा.
So उसकी वजह से that was in crores in 90s.
My God.
So working capital भी block हो गया, and then good money started going after bad money. So eventually everything collapsed. So we still have that land. It's not functional today.
Wow.
But we shut that business in 2007.
Wow. So basically 93 was when I think you said na ki ye hua tha.
98, 99.
So almost like 8-9 years it finally.
Yeah. Before we had finally put a lock. It was 8-9 years.
Yeah.
And I was still in school at that point in time. तब मैंने ये सोच लिया था लाइफ में कुछ भी करेंगे,
बट
टेक्सटाइल्स एंड फैशन तो कभी नहीं करेंगे.
इंटरेस्टिंग.
तो इनफैक्ट एज अ किड आई लव्ड साइंस. आई रिमेंबर ड्यूरिंग माई अर्ली ईयर्स आई जस्ट यूज्ड टू वॉच डिस्कवरी एंड नैट जियो. वेरी मच इंटरेस्टेड इन ऑल एस्पेक्ट्स ऑफ साइंस. 9th स्टैंडर्ड में व्हेन आई वाज इन 9th स्टैंडर्ड आई रिमेंबर एक दिन घर में टीवी पे CNBC चल रहा था, एंड उस टाइम पे कंपनीज के रिजल्ट्स आ रहे थे, एंड I found them so fascinating.
Wow.
That this company reported this much revenue this quarter. Itna profit hua. And those numbers, that green arrow was absolutely magical to my eyes. So from there my interest towards business and numbers started developing more. So I remember from there, from discovery, I became a CNBC watching kid.
Wow. Yeah, I think there's this interesting saying as well, na, that a person is inspired more by the first 16, 17 years of their
Yeah.
life rather than the last 10 years, right? So essentially, even though like kahin na kahin you would have thought ki we would not do a fabric business, or like maybe it would have been difficult to go back into business after seeing those highs and lows,
Yeah.
right? But because you were part of those conversations growing up, because you were passionate about seeing CNBC and getting reports of businesses, and also I think kind of it played a thing in starting your business eventually as well.
I think that's absolutely true. What we see in our childhood and early years
Yeah.
is how we decide. And the more, I'm growing up, the
Yeah.
more I realize that is true.
Yeah.
A lot of our decisions is based on the things that we've seen
Correct.
during our early formative years.
Correct. So then this happened, and then like you were mentioning a trip to Rajasthan, right?
Yeah.
So what were you doing at that time? फिर कैसे लगा कि like वापस इस space में आना है?
Yeah. So I was working in finance. I love numbers, so I studied. I did my MBA in finance,
Okay.
and then I started my journey at a investment bank in Bombay.
Interesting.
During that point in time, I used to travel a lot, and during one of my travel to Rajasthan is where when we went to Rajasthan, went along with my friends. There, I spotted a craft called bandhej.
Interesting.
And what really caught my attention was कि हम हर सिटी जहाँ गए वहाँ पे बंदेज के कपड़े थे in every market, mostly looking the same, and all people were going crazy about it. So that got
like tourists were going crazy.
Yeah, all tourists,
Interesting.
all of these cities have tourists,
Yeah.
and they were all so much interested in this. So then I spoke to a few shopkeepers to understand क्या है ये.
Yeah.
And then what I learned was truly magical, that this was all made by artisans. And because artisans are a small community, they make things together. So that's why everything looked the same. Because artisan के लिए कोई formal education नहीं होती है.
Correct. It's their family and
it's
they
their
learn
family
it.
heritage.
Yeah.
And because they live together, they make together. So then they end up making the same products. So I was very fascinated by bandhej. Then I came back and I started researching on fashion, India's textiles.
Interesting.
That is where the complete I would say my eyes opened. Before we got colonized, India used to make more than 30% of the world's garments.
Wow.
You would remember Silk Route, right?
So Europeans came by the Silk Route to kind of look at garments and look at spices and
So वो silk ढूंढने आए थे Europeans, and Indian crafts and textiles were won by royalty. And today they are nowhere in the fashion global
contract
fashion.
manufacturers हैं.
Yeah. आज हम सिर्फ contract manufacturer बन के रह गए हैं. India is seen as a contract manufacturer for the world, whereas our native textiles and crafts are so good that everyone in the world loves them. But today they are not available in an avatar that would appeal to today's modern day consumers.
Yeah. In fact, like like when we were chatting as well, like right, we saw that almost every state in India has its unique craft, has its unique handlooms, unique textiles, and a lot of it is not like, maybe it's exported outside, right? But it's not really consumed in India, or we don't really talk about it. Like Assam has Mekhla, Kanjipuram sarees in Tamil Nadu, right? Bandej in Rajasthan, right? So every state has its own textile, but we don't really talk about it or consume it internally. It's like generally goes out and is exported.
Yeah. International brands, the luxury brands, they have been using crafts for decades now.
Wow.
And selling it as a luxury product. Recently, some of the most recognized names in the world, they did collection on crafts, chikankari, and selling shirts for $2,000.
Crazy.
And वो यहीं पे यूपी में लखनऊ में बन रहा है.
Yeah. And I think ये भी एक perception है कि like अगर वो एक Indian handicraft है, right? So maybe if it's a Banarsi sari, either it has to be from a luxury brand or a luxury designer, right? But maybe like a designer doesn't have to do with that fabric. It's the craft of that artisan who's actually weaved it and who has actually made it. So it can be actually made affordable as well.
Yeah. So again, because the supply chains are so fragmented, the price shoots up. The price shoots up. Also, crafts have now in India been used by high-end designers. Just by nature of their business model, the products are very expensive. So which is out of reach for most of the people.
Correct.
So while it looks fancy to click it on social media, but people usually cannot access it because it's also not available in an format that they can use it every day. Like everyday clothing, crafts are usually not available in everyday clothing
Correct.
by like large nationwide brands.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
available in small pockets by
Correct.
stores, local stores,
Correct,
local
correct,
designers.
correct, correct. I think large तो fast fashion brands का business model ही different है, right? Like they would kind of go to contract manufacturers, place an order of million, 5 million, 10 million units, and then sell the same product all over the world, right? In a price controlled way. They would not really work with the artisans from that perspective.
Yeah. See, I believe a fashion business can be scalable without being fast. This fast fashion is a very Western thing, which was done just to make bigger companies, sure, but uska side effect ye tha ki it became very unsustainable for the planet, for the consumers, and today it's not sustainable also, because most of these clothes, they are made in countries where there's huge labor exploitation. It's not sustainable at all.
I was seeing this one quote from your website, right? Like, are we sacrificing too much for so little, right? For a piece of clothing. And एक बहुत interesting stat था कि 65% of the world's child labor, right, is actually employed in the fashion industry.
Yeah. So fashion is the second most polluting industry in the world, and one of the biggest employers of child labor and exploited labor. In fact, when I was in my research phases, I saw a documentary called The True Cost. It's an old documentary. It was released, I think, in 2012, 2013. It's still there on Netflix. And it actually shows the dark side of fashion. That while everything, what people generally know is more on the glamour side, but what goes into making fast fashion, that's just exploiting humans.
My God, interesting. So I think that's where the genesis happened. Is it कि like कुछ artisan led करना है, something which is deep rooted in Indian culture, and then how did that kind of take shape, into what Dressfolk is today?
So we started Dressfolk with the idea of modernizing India's traditional handlooms and crafts and bringing them in an avatar that would appeal to today's consumers. So traditional techniques and crafts but in a very modern avatar. Okay. So we started Dressfolk as a Western wear brand in 2017.
Interesting.
And the business grew every year. We were profitable. And then COVID hit. And we were a very small team at that point of time. We were just a team of 3.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think I'd seen one video of yours where you were mentioning कि पहले 200 orders मैंने खुद iron करे, खुद pack करे, like everything you were doing, like, and I think from a 1-bedroom apartment as well.
Yeah, so I started Dressfolk from my apartment. My room was my office. एक cupboard में stock था and एक table थी जिसमें ironing होती थी, and I used to work on that table as well. So first 200 orders I packed myself. And today this really helps because when we are seeing and
you
scaling
can
up,
look at the processes.
So we know exactly कहाँ गड़बड़ आ सकती है.
Yeah. Interesting. So पहले it started as a Western wear brand for 3 years, and but it is not what it is today, right? Like thoda, it has gone through some changes. So
during COVID, of course everyone was in their houses, so were us. So clothing was one of the hardest hit sectors, and at that point of time, I used to speak to a lot of consumers to understand that what is it that is missing from their life and their wardrobe. And then a wonderful insight came to me that they felt that saris is what they truly are looking for, because sarees में traditionally या तो high end designers हैं या very massy brands हैं. There was no brands which were new age doing interesting stuff, which is a great on design but also affordable and accessible. So we did a small pivot. So we did a small collection with sarees in 2021 August.
So basically your TG was majorly women, I'm guessing, और वहाँ से insight आया कि western wear तो है ही, but maybe like there is a bigger gap कि sarees like तो traditional brands है या फिर like not artisan led है, synthetic है, so like there is a, या फिर बहुत pricey है, so that's where there is a gap. So you guys said like let's do like a saree collection.
So I'll tell you a little bit more a little bit more in detail. So when I was interviewing the customers, I asked them so our customers are women above the age of 27. That's where our TG starts from. And when I was interviewing these customers, these women, so something very interesting came to our knowledge, that when all these women were under 25, they had their favorite brands and their favorite choice was Western wear, fast fashion.
Could be like a Zara, H&M,
H&M, Forever. Yes, exactly. These brands were the favorite ones. And when they came into late 20s, their preference moved from Western wear to Indian wear. And there were no brands which stood out as their favorite.
Yeah.
People were buying from different places, different websites and brands,
Hmm.
but none of the brands came out as favorite.
Yeah. Also, another thing happens as you age, because maybe like I'm the other side of 30, and like, so maybe as a consumer, like what I can see is ki when you're younger, maybe you're looking at fast fashion, you're not really looking at durability. You're looking at like different designs, you're looking at changing often, right? But I think as you age, you're looking at quality of comfort, material, comfort, fit, durability, and all of that, right? And essentially, that's when like slow fashion kind of comes into the picture, and you try. I mean, and none of these fast fashion kind of brands offer that experience.
Yeah. So what happens is by late 20s, people have figured out what is it that they are comfortable in.
Yeah.
What is it that looks good on them.
Hmm.
They also have higher disposable income.
Hmm.
So they are able to buy what they like.
Hmm.
What happens in early 20s is people have just started their careers, very limited budgets, and उस time पे ये भी होता है कि if I'm seen in one dress, I don't want to be seen in another, which usually goes by the time one is in late 20s.
Yeah, and I think it's like people are comfortable wearing the same clothes.
Yeah,
over
absolutely.
And over. Yeah.
When we interviewed women, most of them, they said, while we have a very wide wardrobe, it's just a few outfits that we repeat.
Yeah.
And then when I asked more in detail, then I realized this happens because these outfits look very good on them, and they are very comfortable in that.
with
So it's the combination of these two things.
Got it.
So from these insights came the idea of moving and pivoting completely to Indian wear. And we did our first collection of sarees in 2021 end. And it's been 3 years to what we are doing today. So it was a complete fundamental pivot from a business model point of view.
But like, do you think कि you could have continued with Western wear as well? या फिर you felt कि this was like a, because like Western wear, as you said, could have been a market for people who were younger, right? And essentially that also is a space. And then like obviously like sarees and Indian ethnic wear is another space, right? So like you could have combined the two and continued with the two. या फिर like ethnic wear was a better positioning eventually.
See, ethnic wear was a better business model and a better category for sure. What happened was, see, when we are doing crafts, we are using natural yarns only, and we are working with authentic crafts. So most of our products were above 3,000 rupee price point. And then we realized India mein most of the Western wear that is getting sold is under 3,000 rupees.
Got it.
Because again, it's the fast fashion category.
Yeah.
So वो business बड़ा भी होता, तो it would have saturated at a certain scale.
50, 70, 100 crore.
100 crore, 200 crore, 300 crore. उसके ऊपर it would be difficult.
Yeah.
So then we realized let's pivot to sarees. And for first 2 years we were just doing sarees. We explored various crafts from Bengal, MP, Rajasthan.
Yeah. And sarees ka very interesting thing is it can give you like a high average order value, but I mean it will not be as expensive as the luxury or premium brand. So I mean like to a consumer's mindset, it will still be very affordable.
Yeah.
Right? Like spending like 1 lakh on a designer saree versus getting the same like experience maybe in a 15, 20, 25,000 saree.
Yeah. Absolutely right. So sarees, the perceived value is also high for consumers. So we typically operate. So we have different categories. For festive and wedding related sarees, we go between 7K to 10K. That's the primary category. And for everyone who wears sarees, wears a saree with a blouse. And then they also need underskirt. So we also do stitch blouses and blouse fabrics.
Okay, that's like made to order.
So no, like how somebody chooses a shirt, that's how they select a stitch blouse. And interestingly, we've been able to figure out the right sizes. Our return rates are absolutely low. It's one of the best in the industry out there right now. Again, because we hear our consumers very carefully, and we've done some tweaks in the traditional size chart system to be able to come to that statistic.
Interesting. So I think we'll, I would love to kind of talk on that, and I think it's a very interesting point. But I think एक takeaway तो यार ये है कि अब I think it's been like 7 or 8 years for you in the business, right? And as a founder, you continuously need to evolve, right? Like essentially, like figure out where the larger market is, keep evolving. Like, so your ethos is still the same, like taking Indian handicrafts, modernizing it, taking it to India and to the globe, right? But maybe like the format has changed from Western wear to ethnic wear with sarees and all. Maybe like you'll expand your portfolio later as well. So I think that's interesting. Ki, like as a founder, you need to continuously be on it and continuously keep evolving and kind of growing your TAM and kind of growing your business and being close to the consumer, because the consumer kind of gave you this insight ki, that these are the products I'm looking at eventually.
Yeah.
So interesting. So yeah, abhi, what does your family say ki वापस back in the textile and fabric business?
Yeah. So first few years, my family, was always supportive, but for first few years they did not really get why am I doing this. Now when the business has started to take some shape, it started to see the traction, then they are now more assured कि चलो कुछ तो कर रहा है.
Got it. And यार इंडिया का जो साड़ी मार्केट है, that's also massive, right? Like 80,000 crore का market है, largely unorganized. Yeah, so you will either have your traditional retailers and all, right? Or you'll have your traditional brands. And अभी तो like 2-3 brands का IPO भी हुआ है, like we were talking about Kolhapur sarees and I think Saraswati sarees as well. And
Kala Mandir.
And Nalli sarees also like is a very old brand, right? So I think वैसे interesting है कि like 80,000 crore का market, largely unorganized, right? And like if I were to look at how my mom would have shopped for a साड़ी, उनका था कि अगर उनको कोई let's say बनारसी साड़ी चाहिए तो उनको एक शॉप पता है वाराणसी में जहाँ पे वो जाएंगी और वो मतलब अच्छे हैंडीक्राफ्ट से काम करते हैं, आर्टिसन काम करते हैं और उनका ऑथेंटिक है, तो देयर इज ट्रस्ट, राइट? बट देयर इज अ, इफ यू लुकिंग एट सेलिंग इट ऑनलाइन, देयर इज अ ट्रस्ट गैप, राइट? एंड आई थिंक दैट्स व्हाई अ लॉट ऑफ D2C brands have now started coming in, right? So like you'll have like your raw mango, your Tilfi, your Benares, and then Titan, which ran Tanishq, is now running a brand called Tanera in an offline store format as well, right? And they're trying to do what Tanishq did with kind of bringing authenticity to jewelry and essentially now doing it with ethnic wear, right? So how do you see the market kind of evolving, right? Like where do you kind of see your strengths, your moat? Like how do you see your business growing? How do you build trust with consumers and repeatability as well?
Right. See, what you said about our parents' generation, they used to buy saris in a particular manner, and today what is happening in the sari market is that, as you rightly mentioned, that it's largely unorganized. 80% of it is unorganized. Now what a fundamental shift has happened from our parent generation to our generation is that women are now working. Now earlier, because women were homemakers, so they had more time, so for them to go and do sari shopping, they could spend the entire day at a store. They would want to see everything. Today, with the day and age we live in, now everyone is working. They have limited time and they want to spend the time with their family doing activities. They would not take out one day to go and do sari shopping.
So you're saying that the ideology of how women shop has changed?
Absolutely. It has changed, and not just for women, for everyone. Today we are so used to faster deliveries. With more technological changes, our behavior is also changing, and that is why we see that in the sari category there's a lot of moving from unorganized to organized sector. That's why very large family houses are coming into this business. As you mentioned that Tatas have come into this, and giving that name really builds the credibility.
Correct.
Yeah.
Interesting. So like I think building a brand for women, like are there any differences between how men shop and women shop? Like what have you noticed between your customers?
It's a big difference. Okay, I'll give you an example. Let's say usually when a guy wants to go and buy a white shirt, they would have 2-3 brands in their mind. If they are going to a mall, they would go to the first brand. If they found the shirt they were looking for,
they are happy and satisfied. They are happy.
And come back. They buy and they'll come back.
Yeah.
When women go to shopping, let's say a woman has decided to buy a salwar suit, and they have identified 4-5 brands they want to check out. Now, if they go to the first store and they like something, they would still go to the second and the third and the fourth store to see if they find something better. If not, they would come and buy the first product. So there's a very big difference in how men and women shop.
And that's why do you think there are so many brands, right, which are now design led, right? Essentially, when you're looking for a sari, then you can compare all of these brands, and eventually, like wherever you see comfort in terms of design and other things like in pricing and all, that's when you go for. Like that's why there's been an increase of so many D2C brands, which are now coming online.
Yeah. See, women buy clothing, or everyone buys clothing for 2 reasons. A, they are very comfortable in it. Secondly, it makes them look good. They feel confident in that piece of clothing.
Yeah.
So that's the prime reason why somebody buys a pair,
Yeah.
some clothing.
Yeah.
Now, when we are building the brand, how are we different from other players out there is that we take care of these two aspects. We design everything that we sell.
That's in house, like pura.
Everything. Like we have a design team in house. We start from the yarn stage, and then we work with the weavers to weave the yarn. All our sarees are hand woven. We work with hand woven fabrics or surface crafts. So again, the idea is to modernize handlooms and crafts of India. So because we are designing everything and we are direct to consumer, our D2C channel is our biggest sales channel. So we are able to bring these crafts at these prices. And that's where the differentiating factor for the consumer comes in. Usually what happens in this industry is that either there are marketplaces where, or stores are picking from the artisans. So the consumer has seen the same or similar product somewhere else. So wherever...
So design, like, you're saying is one of the biggest kind of differentiators when it comes to, like, and comfort obviously as well.
Design, comfort of natural yarns. We don't use any synthetics at all. So design, comfort, and the fact that it is actually handcrafted and handwoven separates them from anything which is more machine made, which is mass produced. So they would not find 100 people wearing the same outfit. And what happens is, you ask me about repeatability. So when consumers receive a packaging, they receive the box, when they go through the entire story, it really helps them connect to the India. It really helps them to connect to the country, the country's rich legacy. And this is one of the factors which they take pride in. They are very proud of the fact that they are actually wearing India's culture on them.
No, I think a mic drop moment for me was when I saw Guneet Munga, collecting her Oscar, and she was wearing a Banarsi sari. I think she won an Oscar for Elephant Whisperers, right? She was wearing a pink Banarsi sari, right? And I mean, like people are proud of their heritage, of their culture, and representing India at a global stage, right? And I think what you mentioned about, like choosing for handcrafted, handwoven materials versus synthetic. Like when we were doing our research, like we came across Facebook groups, right, which have like 2 lakh, 3 lakh, 4 lakh members, and like thousands of posts every day. And like if you look at the entry criteria for the group, it said you have to post a picture of your sari, right? And then essentially it cannot be a synthetic or machine made. It has to be like hand woven or handcrafted, right? Like this group, like 6 yards and sari speak and all. So I think definitely there is, like, when people receive that product, they want to talk about it, they want to showcase it to everyone, to their friends and family. And obviously I think there is a need from a comfort and material aspect, and the feel of the product as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is also the moat for the brand. This is not something that somebody with a large chunk of money can come in and build the brand the next day. Because it takes time to build the artisan network, to go deep into the supply chain, to build the SOPs and the processes.
Tell us a little from a supply chain perspective, right? Like how do you and again, I'm asking this from, let's say, the perspective of a D2C founder, right? Like and like your model can be like done across multiple artisan-led crafts, right? And I think you were telling me, Gabi, you were at a conference as well, which had like which represents millions of artisans, right? So how does one do capability building with artisans? How do you kind of build your supply chain? How do you kind of ensure ki sare SOPs are in place, like, and there's consistency of the fabric of the product?
See, building supply chain for any business, including ours, it's a messy job. तो हाथ तो गंदे करने ही पड़ेंगे, ठीक है. Today we are working with more than 800 artisans and weavers across 6 states, and we are working with them directly. The first artisan network that we started working with, I went to the village, this was Rajasthan, I went to the village in Rajasthan, and I just went to different houses of artisans to talk to them, to see कि कौन काम करने को ready होगा हमारे साथ. That's how it started. And over a period of time, we've been able to build SOPs around this process of discovering new artisans. To whenever we work with the new artisan, we have our checklist that these are the things that we have to follow. These are the things that the artisan needs to follow. In fact, now we are working with an all women artisans group in Bengal, which is managed and run by all women.
Wow, amazing. And I'm guessing, like, सारे artisans का like the craft will also be different, like because every state has its own
Yeah.
craft, so building that into the SOPs and everything would also be required. And then essentially, have you seen कि artisans का income grow हो रहा है, like their livelihoods are becoming better? Have you seen कि they've been able to employ more people and do it at a larger scale?
For sure. See, what happened with us is when we started working, of course, the scale was very small. Today, we are at a much bigger scale. And the first set of artisans that we worked with, to give you a context, we've been able to increase their annual earnings by over 150%.
Wow.
And what
So
happened?
normally, like how much would they earn in a month? Pehle?
Right. So pehle their earnings was about 6 to 7,000 in a month, and now they are earning more than 15,000 in a month in a very small village, where a 15,000 is a substantial sum.
Yeah, and by still following the art and culture which they've grown up kind of practicing.
Yeah. So what happens is so one of the biggest challenges in the supply chain in artisan industry is that the artisans don't get work round the year. There are periods when they get work, and there are a lot of dry periods when they don't get any work. So for us, the first thing was to solve for this problem.
Consistency.
Consistency. Because if the artisan does not know whether tomorrow he or she will be able to feed the family or not, it's just going to put mental stress on them. So first we solve for that we have to build consistency, that we have to give them the work around the year. And from there, then we started going on how can we make the process more efficient, how we can put more money in their pockets. And today, as I said, we are working with 800 weavers, but the goal is twofold. We continuously keep on optimizing and increasing their earnings, and at the same time we keep working with artisans from more states, because every state has their own craft.
Correct. Yeah. And like have you been able to solve for cash flow and all for them as well? Because like I'm sure like if they're supplying to bigger companies and legacy brands, तो उनके payment cycles थोड़े slow होंगे, which would kind of then mean more stress for them. Like, so has that also improved for them?
Yeah. So with a very large legacy businesses, the payment cycles are very, very long.
Correct.
Our payment cycles are less than half of what they typically are used to.
Yeah.
But we are also working on a methodology. Again, we should be live with it in next 3 to 4 months, where the minute they submit a bill, we immediately get them paid.
Wow.
And
that is a moat, right? Like that is a moat. Like essentially, if you're able to improve the livelihoods and working conditions and cash flow and everything that is important to a artisan, like they would be more loyal, to the brand.
For sure, because see, rural economy works very different from urban economy. Rural economy is based a lot on trust. And as we are able to build the trust, we hope that we are able to grow India's rural economy, India's artisan network.
Amazing. I think we'll move to the next section, right? Where I would love to kind of talk to you about your D2C traction, right? So essentially, the goal of again this section is कि, like अभी like what is your traction? How many orders you're getting? You mentioned कि return rates बहुत कम है. So वो कैसे हैं? As a founder, क्या क्या metrics हैं जो हमें track करने चाहिए on a day-to-day basis, right? Like then you guys are a very capital efficient company, like you've not raised a lot of capital, वो भी हम बात करेंगे. So कैसे profitably बनाना है, like कौन से metrics है जो important होते हैं, meta ads कैसे चलानी है. So I think like in this section we're going to go deeper into your D2C and see how kind of you've scaled. But would love to kind of know to start कि अभी कितना traction है, how are things going?
So we are currently at about 10 crores ARR. We are inching close to a crore a month in revenue.
Net revenue.
Net revenue.
This is net of
Net of
discounts,
everything.
taxes.
Everything. Net of GST also.
I think this is a good practice. Like for early stage founders, like always report your net revenue rather than your gross sales. Yeah.
And for us, we have a very high AOV. We have an AOV north of 7,000 rupees. This actually really helps us to experiment with different things. Usually high AOV is also seen as a deterrent, but I also think in a category like us, it is really helpful.
perceived value बहुत ज़्यादा है. So तुम्हारी कैटेगरी के हिसाब से AOV कम ही है. Like I would always think कि साड़ी के लिए शायद 15, 20, 25,000 हो, but the perceived value is higher. So 7,000 is actually a good AOV from that point of view.
So like we do a lot of blouses. So blouses in the range of 2,000 to 3,500. So AOV blended is about 7,000. For us, one of the things that we've been really able to control is our returns. So usually returns in fashion industry is very high.
हाँ, like around 20-25% तो होता ही है.
That's a norm, right? For us, our returns is about 2%.
And like, कैसे, like what did you do there?
So we built the trust. अगर ड्रेसफोक पे किसी भी कस्टमर ने कुछ भी खरीदा है, there's a 100% रिफंड पॉलिसी, irrespective आपने सेल पे खरीदा है, irrespective आपने डिस्काउंट पे खरीदा है.
So this 2% return
हाँ.
is like in spite of that 100%
Yes.
refund policy.
Yes. So I'll tell you, like, we've done a few things. One of the biggest reasons why returns come in fashion industry is that what people see on screen and what
Is
actually
not
gets
what they
delivered
get.
is not same.
Yeah.
Now, because we are a D2C brand having a complete control over the supply chain and the distribution, we've mitigated that problem. So consumers get exactly what they see on
So
screen.
मतलब cataloging and all becomes super important.
Yes.
Yeah.
So whenever we are doing our shoots also, at that point of time, we ensure that the image looks exactly like the
how the consumer would get
actual
it.
product. Yeah. So we do our tweaks there also. This also helps in reducing. And secondly, we also have a lot of information on the website about the fabrics, about the craft. So when consumer is making a purchase, they are making an informed purchase. We tell them that, okay, this is this fabric, this is the content. So they are not in for any surprises. So all these things combined together has led us to this rate.
And sizing mein, like you were mentioning ki some things that you've done, some hacks that you've kind of had to kind of understand more about Indian sizing charts and all.
Yeah.
So usme, like, what have you guys done?
Yeah. So every return that we get, we talk to the consumers. So when I say 2% return, this is including across all categories, including the blouses, which is stitched garment. So every return that we get, we speak to the consumers. If there's the fit is described as a return reason, we go and see the spec sheet of that product, and then we make minor tweaks depending on the customer feedback. So now, because we've done this over a period of time, now we've been able to tweak our size charts accordingly.
I think ये बहुत important है, like in the world of AI-led bots and WhatsApp bots and kind of doing automated things for the consumers. At least I think having that manual touch, talking to the consumer, figuring out कि क्या work करा, क्या work नहीं करा, and then making those changes and incrementally, right? Like not over one consumer, over 100 consumers, 200 consumers, 300 consumers is something that really kind of goes a long way in terms of improving your returns and everything.
Yeah, and I think consumers care. A lot of time consumer might not be available, but if a brand goes with a genuine intent, consumers take out time to explain.
Yes. Interesting. So एक बार ऊपर से करते हैं. You said कि about 10 crore ARR net revenue, 1 crore monthly. Average order value is 7,000 rupees. 7,000. उसमें then generally, like, what are your gross margins? How much would you pay to an artisan?
Right.
How much do you spend on marketing? I'm not trying to I'm not trying to expose share more about your business, but essentially from a learning perspective, you don't need to give us like exact numbers, but ballpark bhi chalega, so that founders can start thinking about it from that perspective.
So our gross margins are in the range of 60 to 65%. Typically about 30%, 30 to 35% goes to the artisans who make the clothes.
Wow.
So on our website there's a feature, if a consumer goes and they add several products to the cart, on the cart page it will show them how much money of that value is going to the artisans.
You are giving to the artisan.
Giving to the artisans.
Amazing.
Yeah. So typically 65%, 60 to 65 is the gross margins. We are CM3 positive.
CM3 क्या होता है, like just for the comfort of our...
Right. So at CM3 we've included all the variable costs, including all sorts of marketing. उसके बाद it's just a fixed cost which is remaining.
Your salaries and everything.
The salaries and the rents, that's it.
And generally, like, how much is your marketing cost?
So marketing cost for us is about 25%.
Okay.
Overall.
Got it.
Again, because we are at early stage, we are still doing a balance, figuring out on how do we keep this in check as the brand is scaling up.
Got it. And I'm guessing Meta would be the platform.
Yes.
They will be spending the most of your money. Interesting. Yeah. So I think holy trinity hai for a consumer brand to look at scale, which is high AOV, gross margins of about 60 to 65%, low return rates, and marketing costs below 25%. So I think kudos to you ki I think you've got all of these in check, and I'm assuming like repeat cycles will not be very frequent for you, because obviously like it's a either an occasional purchase, or like people will not kind of buy it every 1, 2, 3 months. But I'm still guessing, like, because of the comfort and all, people would come back and be repeating when you have different designs.
Yeah, we have now close to 35% annual repeat customer rate. But with now more categories.
Over a period of?
Over a period of 1 year.
Acha. So basically that means that 35% consumers who have bought in a year will come back and buy something again.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So because see, it's a high AOV product.
Yeah.
So a lot of time what happens is consumers buy one product to try, and when they receive the product, they like it. Then they come back very immediately in the next few days
Yeah.
to buy something again.
Interesting. And from your ads strategy, right, and from your content strategy, so like so you mentioned 25, does it include your campaigns, your influencer, and your media spends as well? Yeah, this only includes your media spends.
This includes media spends, and if I include everything, so that would be about 28-29%.
Okay, so like what do you think has worked for you, like in terms of, do you do it in-house, do you have like an agency that
Right.
you work with?
So everything is in-house for us.
Okay.
Because content is again the soul of the company.
Yeah.
So I think the company can itself do the best job there.
Yeah.
What has really worked for us is a lot of word of mouth from the
Okay.
consumers, great customer testimonials, and a lot of celebrities wearing Dressfolk organically.
Oh wow.
Yeah, like we've never gone the paid route where we've paid a celebrity to wear Dressfolk. Some of the best actresses in the country, they won Dressfolk, and this is
How
all
do you
of it.
kind of notice कि कब किसने पहने हैं?
So a lot of time people send me.
Acha.
Recently, we saw Janvi Kapoor in a movie Ulaj,
Okay.
wearing Dressfolk, and like I remember Netflix.
This is all organic.
This is all organic.
Yeah.
I remember a friend sending me on my Instagram, "Hey, is this Dressfolk? Looks
Yeah.
like it."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Yeah, this is Dressfolk." Then we spotted Diya Mirza in a BBC interview wearing Dressfolk.
Yeah.
Shilpa Shetty wore Dressfolk. She was traveling to her hometown for a puja. So a lot more. Guneet Monga, as you mentioned, has won Dressfolk at an award function.
Amazing. So I think, so what you're trying to say is कि real people, real stories,
Yeah.
I think is one aspect of it. Then essentially organic word of mouth by celebs and all is another aspect. And like from your content perspective as well, like what kind of content generally works, on your ads and all when you're looking at converting. And this I'm just asking, from the point of view of a founder who's trying to build an early stage fashion brand, right? Like,
Right.
मतलब किस type की ads ज़्यादा work करती हैं? Like, is it more video led? Is it more reels led? Is it like catalog ads across?
So we do a
platforms?
combination of all types of ads. Catalog ads really help in bottom of the funnel, where somebody has already added to the cart, and it helps them to mitigate their concerns. For the top of the funnel, we use a lot of pictures from our customers after their approval. We also try to play a lot on the occasions. Let's say wedding season is coming in, so we'll speak a lot about weddings. Diwali is coming in.
And still doing organic content also.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And we do a lot of content on the crafts also.
Yeah.
And we don't try to make it about the process
Yeah.
or the products. We make it about the people,
Yeah.
the craftsmen and craftswomen who are
Yeah.
making the products.
No, here I think when you're looking at storytelling on Instagram as a platform, right, a brand has to think like a creator, right? So it has to think about ki, how do I add value to the consumer of this reel, right? So like, is it entertainment? Is it education? Is it telling me a story about an artisan who actually made a certain product and improving their quality of life? So अगर तुम 8 out of 10 you will give value to a consumer, और उसमें फिर 2 out of 10 you will also talk about, hey, this is my best selling product, hey, listen, Guneet Monga wearing it, somebody else wearing it, people will say, okay, let me try this brand, it has given me some, and I'll order. People won't mind, right? So in that creator mindset of giving value to a consumer, like at least on while building a brand on socials and building that community, I think is very, very important.
Yeah, for sure. Today, because the whole content format has changed.
Yeah.
So brand has to talk like normal people and not as entities where the conversation is from one to many.
Yeah.
It has to be a one-on-one conversation.
Yeah. Interesting. I hope that young founders would kind of take something back, from your experience of, scaling the metrics in the right way. I think next I would love to talk about your fundraising journey, right? And again, like fundraising चाहे आप किसी भी background से हो is always very difficult. It's very hard, right? हम लोग डिस्कस कर रहे थे दैट नितिन इज़ फ्रॉम कानपुर, और हमें पता लगा कि मल्टीपल यूनिकॉर्न फाउंडर्स हैव स्टडीड इन द सेम स्कूल दैट ही हैज़ गॉन टू, बट आई एम स्टिल श्योर लाइक फंड रेजिंग इज चैलेंजिंग फॉर एवरी वन, राइट? सो जस्ट टेक अस थ्रू, लाइक 8 साल हो गए हैं, लाइक व्हाट हैज़ बीन द फंड रेजिंग जर्नी?
So, okay, I started Dressfolk with a little bit of savings from my corporate stint and a small working capital limit from a public sector bank,
Okay.
which was collateral free.
कैसे?
हाँ, so
ये तो मतलब बहुत ही हैक है जो मतलब people should know.
So, okay, जब when I was registering the company, I opened the bank account with a private bank because I expected कि भाई banking easy होगी.
Yeah.
But what at that point of time I did not know that it's very difficult to get a collateral free loan from a private bank, almost next to impossible. So I went to my bank and I asked them, hey, this is a scheme which is backed by government. It's a scheme called Mudra scheme.
Okay.
So government started it initially for 10 lakh rupees. Up to 10 lakh rupees working capital will be, or any form of loan will be given collateral free. But today the government has actually different schemes to back entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
One is called CGTMAC. Now we are under CGTMAC.
उसका full form क्या होता है?
Credit guarantee for medium and small businesses.
Interesting.
Where up to 5 crores the banks can give money in a form of working capital or a loan collateral free.
Oh wow! And at what interest rate?
Interest rates are very less.
Acha.
Again, it's about 12-13% and
Okay.
also a little bit subsidized by the government.
Got it. यार ये तो बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग है. Like so if you are in a business which is actually like जिसमें cash flows थोड़े tight हैं या फिर cycles are larger, right? And you need working capital. I think this CGTMAC is definitely a scheme that you should look at or contact Nitin next year because he has availed it, so he would know. But ये interesting है यार because आज की डेट में गवर्नमेंट हैज सो मेनी पॉलिसीज राइट लाइक अगर आपको थोड़ा सा फंड रेजिंग भी करना है राइट स्टार्टअप इंडिया सीड स्कीम इज सो अमेजिंग लाइक 25 लाख to 50 lakh कैपिटल यू गेट विदाउट एनी इक्विटी एट एन इंटरेस्ट रेट ऑफ 2 to 3%. And I'm telling you, it's more efficient than a VC, right? Like, so I mean, at ACLR8 we fund companies as well, right? But government scheme, Startup India Seed Scheme, 90 days में from the day of pitching till the day of receiving the money, you have it in your bank account, right? So I think that's one key. Like, explore all options, whether it's a PSU working capital loan, या फिर CGTMAC, या फिर Startup India Seed Scheme to kind of raise your seed round. Like the VC is not only the only route.
Yeah. See, one of the I think most interesting things that I've learned in my fundraising journey is that you just need to find one person who understands what you're doing and believes you. When I spoke about the bank limit, I went to 7 different banks. Private banks told me that, hey, we do not have this scheme. I'm like, it is shown on your website that you do this scheme. Then they told me कि देखो सीधी सी बात है, we are mandated by the government, so we do it. Otherwise, it's usually doesn't happen. Then I went to public sector banks. The 5th public sector bank that I went to, where I submitted the papers, there after a month of meeting them, then the bank manager at that point of time, she came to my apartment to see where I'm working from. She saw the stock, saw the ironing, and then she granted us that initial limit. Then over a period of time, that limit got extended. We came under CGTMAC. But I think these schemes are very good to start, because one of the starting points is that where do we get the first capital?
Correct.
And also private money is a lot more about growth. That's how I see it. Once the basics are set.
Yeah.
So I did not want to raise any venture money before my basics were set.
Yeah.
So started with my savings and working capital limit from a bank. And then when we were building the supply chain, we needed some capital.
So this is what year?
So this is, I'm telling you, 2021.
Acha, so 2017 to 2020, this was the only capital that you had raised.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So this was the capital because उस time पे 2021 में we were also profitable.
Correct.
तो उस time पे need थी नहीं.
Yeah.
And when we pivoted, we started working with the artisans. We needed to build the supply chain and set up the artisan network. Then we pitched to our family offices. And instead of taking money together, we took 15 lakh rupees every month for a period of a year.
Acha, so basically almost like 1 crore 80 lakhs, but 15 lakhs over a period of a year.
Oh yeah. Because I was like, the minute I am able to set up the supply chain, we will take only that much. We don't want to raise extra. And what because, again, going back to my roots and early years, I know पैसा खर्च बहुत जल्दी हो जाता है. And the more money you have, then the more riskier bets one starts taking in. And in my, what I am building at Dressfolk, this is not where without building the backend and the supply chain, I can really scale up the business. So that fundamental base has to be very solid.
Yeah. No, I think some very interesting points were made. हर business का एक gestation period होता ही है, right? So you cannot scale Dressfolk to a 100, 200, 300 crore brand without setting up the supply chain, right? And
Yeah.
supply chain cannot be done today, right? It
Yeah.
has to be done over a period of time because it requires capability and capacity building at an artisan level,
Yeah.
and building SOPs. So, not raising aggressive growth capital where, because VC money then comes with that those expectations
Yeah.
of 2x, 3x, 4x growth every year, right?
Yeah.
So, so being very mindful कि आपको कब रेज करना है, लाइक सो मे बी लाइक अ फैमिली ऑफिस से जब आप रेज करते हो, their expectations are a little lesser in terms of growth as compared to a VC back money, right?
Yeah.
So essentially, I think that was another good call, and like you all obviously staggered the payments and spread over a period of time. That was also quite interesting.
Yeah. So usually, again, this is something which is also a norm, but we tried it. I'm like, what's the harm?
Yeah, correct.
So I think a lot of things that I've done is, ki, what is the downside? What is the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
But if it works out,
Yeah.
it becomes really big.
Yeah.
And from there we built the supply chain. And early last year is when we did our first VC round.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Again, we are fortunate to have partnered with amazing fund and some great D2C founders who are our investors as well, and who keeps helping us with different intricacies of the business.
Yeah, interesting. And I know the story, but I will still ask Nitin, ki, like, what are some hacks? How did you get some of India's best D2C founders to invest in Dressfolk?
See, okay, so for me, because I make products for women, and a lot of people I pitched to were men. So while they understood the business, they could not touch and feel. They could touch the product, but they would not feel about it.
Yeah.
So
or they would not understand the product intrinsically.
Yeah. So what I understood was I made their partners or mothers or wives try out the products, and then when they got the feedback from them, so of course the business side they understood from me, but when they got the product feedback from their trusted people, that's where the confidence also came in them.
Interesting. So basically, like, in a way, like, before asking a VC to or an angel to kind of invest money in a company, get them to experience the product in some capacity or the other.
Yeah, because you see, it's natural. Once somebody likes the product or the service, then it's very natural for them to be more receptive about everything. If they cannot, if they do not understand the product, they would look at it from a very detached point of view.
Yes. And I think some of your investors have been women, and they've asked कि यार हमारे husbands के लिए भी वो बना दो.
Yeah. So a lot of our investors are women, and they've asked me to make matching outfits for their partners, and it's out there on the web.
Interesting, amazing. And here, what have you learned, from your fundraising journey, right? Like, obviously, like, you shared some interesting insights कि public sector से raise कर सकते हो, government back schemes हैं, get angels to try the product, now you've raised VC money as well, like, और क्या 3-4 learnings हुई हैं, like, I'm sure there would be failures as well, right? Like, बहुत लोगों ने मना भी करा होगा, right? So like what have you learned, like, which you would like to kind of share with early stage founders?
So one of the most important things that I've learned after my first round was that a no is never a no. Forever. For example,
no is a maybe is a yes.
Yeah, and it keeps on changing.
At least in the world of startup investing,
it keeps on changing with different data points, different things that happen in the market. So our seed round lead investor, they had evaluated us. Then they had said a no, and then they raised a concern that we have a concern around this point in time. So the concern was that you have very high product value. How are you going to reach to a larger segment? Right. So we presented them a plan that hey, we have a different product coming in, same handloom hai, handwoven hai, which is going to be a lot more affordable. So we have a range of sarees which starts from 3,000, handwoven cotton, which is for everyday wear. We presented them the plan, we showed them the math behind it, and then they said a yes. So never take things personally, because the other person is also investing, because they have a fiduciary responsibility. They have a responsibility to make money for themselves or their investors.
Correct.
So don't take things personally. I think that would be there. So in fact, couple of founders that I pitched to who said no, they have become very good mentors. I think that's one of the best things about our ecosystem, that people are actually there to help everyone out. So even though somebody said no to me for investment, they are helping me out in 10,000 different ways. So I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, amazing. So I think like, what have been your learnings in terms of expanding your network, building your network? Like, how have you gone about that, especially because I think you are from a small city like Kanpur, right? And then essentially you came to Bombay for the first time when you studied, and then you started up in Delhi, right? So like, how does one kind of build their community, build their network?
I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Before starting up, I would not go to and speak to a random person or reach out to a random person because I was not that open to meet new people. Entrepreneurship taught me that. The one of the best things that entrepreneurship did to me, it made me into a person now that I enjoy meeting new people. So I love meeting new people, getting to know them, sharing Dressfolk story with them, uh, and the more one gets in the network of good people, the network keeps on expanding. So just meeting new people, interacting with them, getting to know them, and that's how things happen. I think it happens very organically. Anyone or I've never done that, but whenever I've seen that any relationship is built with some intention or a transaction in mind, it never materializes.
हम लोग बात कर रहे थे, life is never about exchanging dollars, right?
Yeah. So it never materializes. Just reach out to anyone organically. If you bump into anyone, just say a hi, and from there things happen.
And most founders are receptive and open to help because they've been in that journey themselves.
Most founders and nowadays investors also, because one of the things that is happening great at Indian ecosystem is a lot of operators are now becoming investors.
Correct.
So they really understand what a founder is going through, and they are very perceptive about that. They might fund you or not fund you, but they would understand you. Empathy hogi, right? Correct. And that is again very beautiful.
Amazing, yaar. I hope that like early stage founders could take like a lot of value from from this podcast, and please feel free to reach out to Nitin or me if you need any support. We'll do this last segment jahan pe we have a rapid fire with you, right? And essentially maybe some questions that we don't know about your personal life. So like just quickly, whatever first thing comes to your mind, you can answer that. So what is your Instagram screen time?
1 hour 57 minutes. It was yesterday.
सही है यार, मतलब 2 hours is not a lot. Like I work at Instagram, so mine is way higher.
It is not?
Yeah, 2 hours is okay. Like I mean, चलता है इतना. Like I have seen creators or founders with a 6 to 7 hour Instagram screen time as well.
Really?
So yours is manageable.
Okay.
How did you come up with the name of your brand?
So when I was in my research phases, I wanted a name which combines India's culture, traditions with a very modern name. So hence the name Dressfolk. While dress is very modern, folk is cultural. And if you see our logo, the motif is there, which is found in Indian rangolis across the country, across
the motif,
the motif, and the font is very contemporary. Hence name Dressfolk. I also did not want to restrict to a particular category of clothing, because then it becomes too restrictive, and it prevents from expanding into more categories. We want to be in clothing space, but sarees is where we started with, and now it's gonna be a lot more in the coming times.
Amazing. I think beautiful story and beautiful name. 5 people you message every day.
Most of them are from my team. So my ops head, my social media person, my product head. These are the 3 people.
मतलब सारे business related answers नहीं, मतलब ऐसा नहीं है, like
but that is life of a founder. That's the life of a founder. Usually one of the things which is not spoken about is that when you're a founder, a lot of times your personal life takes a backseat. So today my most message people are actually from my team, where I am speaking to them on a daily basis. In fact, now my HR is one of the most messaged people, because we were just chatting today in the morning. We are like, we've not spoken in the last 2 days. Is everything all right?
Amazing. If you were not a founder, what would you have been doing?
I never had anything in mind except being a founder. So like a very different story.
मतलब when I was studying at Narsi Munju also, तब भी पता था कि चाहे fabric business नहीं करना, but पता था कि founder ही होना है.
यही करना है. I remember I was 7-8 years old. उस time पे मेरे को robots का plant डालना था. Because I had seen plants back at the home, like factories. So मेरे को robots का plant डालना था, because that I was very fascinated with robots at that point in time. But I never had anything else in mind. I want to do anything else. So starting up or building a business was always the plan.
How do you unwind?
I've started to work out now. That really helps. And after the workout, taking the steam bath and the shower, that really helps in unwinding the entire day's stress.
Amazing. Favorite founder from the Indian startup ecosystem?
A lot of them actually. I cannot name one. I think Mama Earth, Varun and Ghazal, fantastic story how they've built the company. Number of other founders also. I am quite inspired by the whole truth Shashank.
Yeah.
They are doing
So
an
many
amazing job.
people have called out Shashank, on this podcast. It's insane.
Yeah, I think because the whole way he's building the brand,
Yeah.
it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much, Nitin, for your time. As always, like lovely connecting with you, collaborating with you. As listeners to the podcast, hope you were able to find value from the podcast. And any last words, for the audience, before we end it.
I think building a company is absolutely great.
Hmm.
Just enjoy the journey, and if you're there, just be perseverant and have some patience.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful journey.
Yeah. So, what's the future of Indian craft industry now? Like, according to you?
Indian crafts are getting the limelight in the global fashion map.
Yeah.
We've seen international brands take craft and do wonders with it.
Yeah.
Now, Indian brands, it's time for Indian brands to do the same.
Yeah.
We are not building Dressfolk to become a 100 crore, 200 crore brand.
Hmm.
We believe that we have a potential to be a 1,000 crore brand in the next 8-9 years. That's what we are going after. And if one brand succeeds in the space, it would open funding gates for many players in the industry.
Yeah.
And that's how we see crafts coming to the center stage.
Yeah.
We've seen how family businesses and how the Reliance and the Birlas who have come into this space, the Tatas have come into this space as well.
Yeah. No, yeah, I think there is this, there's this phenomena as well, of cultural distance, right? So, like, essentially, the farther you are away from home, the more you value the things which were from your culture, right? So I'm sure, like, you are now in a Gurgaon, right? Delhi, Gurgaon, but like when you were at Kanpur, you would have done certain things that you would kind of love or miss about in a Delhi or a Gurgaon, right? Similarly, when, let's say, if you travel abroad, your appreciation for Indian arts, culture, heritage increases more, right? So I think there is definitely space for Indian brands, to not only become big in India, but also then rival global competitors, right? Like, why should we kind of only look at ethnic wear from the top fashion labels or from an LV or a Gucci or a Versace, when like there are brands like Dressfolk and so many others, kind of providing the same quality, working with artisans and providing the same level of product at maybe like 1/5, 1/6 the cost. Right, so I think again massive opportunity. Ethnic wear में हमने देखा ही है कितने बड़े brands बने हैं, right?
Yeah.
Traditional brands, हमने listed companies की बात करी. You look at Manyavar, look at Suta sarees, right? Like Libas, right? Like they're all like few years ago they are brands which have started few years ago and have built such large businesses, right? So I think opportunity is massive, and kudos to you guys, for figuring out the space, working with local artisans, as you said, ki khud haath gande karo, like travel, and essentially work with them, understand their problems, and then empower them. So I think very excited on how you guys build, and we will remember this podcast कि जब हम लोग मिले थे हमने podcast record किया था, you were doing 10 crore a year, and now on this podcast you said कि 8 years में we will be doing 1,000 crores a year.
That's
so
the plan.
2032 में जब हम ये podcast देखेंगे, then we can kind of look back on the journey.
Absolutely, and I think it's going to be such a big win for the Indian craft ecosystem.
Yeah. Amazing. And thank you so much, everyone. That was our time. And if you're a founder who's looking at building India's next big consumer business or consumer enabler, look at the explore the ACLR8 website. We would love to partner with you, and we would love to be a part of your journey. Thank you so much.